Hello and welcome to week 29 of the 𝘭t Weekly podcast. This is a gameplay episode and I'm joined, as you'd expect, by JoshXLS. Hello, Josh.
Hi, Ben. Yeah, good to be here. Got two interesting guests on we've had on before, so looking forward to this. It's been an interesting week of gameplay.
Yeah, I think they might have been even on at the same time, unless I'm misremembering. But we have, first of all, expert in gameplay and creates lots of guides, things like that. It is NealGuides. Hello, welcome back.
Hello, thank you again for inviting me back on. Good to be here as usual.
Yeah. Well, especially big thank you for coming on, considering you're relatively fresh off a flight which got in rather late. We appreciate that. And we also have on this podcast, he came on to receive some coaching tips. And I think, some of those did work. And he's back to, I guess, ask more questions, but also give some insights in terms of what he's found has improved his game. It's CherryDrank. Hello.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I would consider myself a bit of an expert, but it's mostly in posting memes and getting people riled up in the YouTube comments over certain players. Josh, I'm coming for that crown.
Yeah, well, let's see. And I think we'll start off actually with chatting to you, Cherry, a little bit about how you found things. We obviously did those 2 episodes with you. Is there anything that you feel has been helping you longer term? Maybe things that you've spotted that you've been working on, anything along those lines at all?
Yeah, so, when we first talked, I was, going between 6 and 7 wins generally. The last couple of weeks I've been traveling a bunch, but I was able to, finish up my champs this weekend, and I got a pretty comfortable 8 wins. I had a couple of shots to get 9, and there was a point where I was like, this might be the week I get 10, but I had 2 kind of tough games at the end, and bottled them a little bit, but I felt like that was probably the closest I've been to getting to 9 or 10 wins. The couple of changes I've made since the kind of gameplay episodes we've done. First, I finally have retired the 4-1-4-1. I actually started using 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘬, but not the one he talked about on the pod. He had in the Discord, which, if you're not a Discord member, make sure you're in there. He posted kind of a new one that he's working with, like 2 false backs. And yeah, I've really liked it. It's kind of, it pushes up your wingbacks a little bit, and I like it. It gives just a couple of different passing options. I've never really liked having my fullbacks on defend. It just, I don't know, especially if you're playing something like the 4-2-2, you lack a lot of width. But yeah, so that's kind of helped a little bit. I've really kind of taken some of the tips you guys have mentioned also on other podcasts, not necessarily just the ones that we did one-on-one. Having multiple tactics set up. So if I get a 4-2-1-3, for example, and I'm just like not able to break it down, or I'm having a problem, I'll switch to that 4-1-2-1-2 that you had kind of posted, because I do feel like it does. It gives you kind of different looks against that real meta formation. And also, I do keep that 4-1-4-1 in my tactics, because if for some reason it's just the game's not clicking, I'll just switch to it just because it's a formation I know really well. I know where the players are going to be constantly. So I've been doing a lot of that. That's helped quite a bit. There's been a number of times where I've been down 2-0, and at halftime I'm like, all right, let's switch the tactic up. I'll even trigger the different mentality. Like I'll trigger to the attacking mentality, which I feel like gets a little bit higher of a press and get your guys going forward a little bit more. And I think that's kind of helped probably at least 1 win per weekend league, just having that and being able to change to multiple tactics, change that mentality. I've been trying to definitely jockey more since every time I'm playing, I hear Josh in like the back of my head just saying jockey, make sure you're jockeying. So I've been trying to do that a bit. And I've also tried not to do that right stick flick as much. I still use it occasionally because I am using forwards with Rapid Plus, and so getting that first touch sometimes does work. But if I try it once and I can tell that the player is kind of reading it or expecting me to do that, I usually just don't try it again. But every once in a while, like you'll notice, like, oh, they're kind of cheating to the inside, looking for that pass. You know, sometimes just doing that and that first touch with rapid, you know, getting the ball out in front. You know, sometimes that gets me in. But yeah, I've tried to kind of, you know, not do that first touch as much because, you know, I went back and watched those games after we had done the pod, and it's like, wow, I probably was doing it like 10 times a game, and that's probably not even being that's not even over exaggerating, right? And now it's more like, you know, maybe 1 or 2, and the success rate is just better just because I can kind of see more like, all right, maybe this will work here, and it's not going to work in another spot.
Yeah, actually, we had a question in from Bert. He said, has Cherry's finishing improved? I really miss his champs screenshots of losing games with massively different XG in his favor. I think it was something that we talked a bit about when you were on the podcast before, but yeah, have you found that you've gotten any better in terms of converting chances, or do you think that's actually more down to XG itself, I guess, than a fair reflection?
Yeah, I do think that it is... XG is kind of funny, right? You know, I was taking a lot of finesses from outside the box, and right, those don't count for a lot. But usually, when you have high XG, what I've noticed, it means that you've been inside the box and have had good chances. I notice I have a really high XG when I get shots blocked a lot, and I think that's just a matter of like, hey, I'm inside the box and taking a shot, and maybe the game just doesn't like understand, like, hey, like, even though you're just outside or you're just inside the box, there's 4 defenders in front of you. Like, that's probably not a high percentage chance. So I feel like those games have come down a little bit because I'm at least trying not to shoot as much in bad positions. I will say, with the addition of the low driven play style, I've actually noticed something. And it's just kind of a matter of, like, you know, the play style flashing. I always thought that I knew how to do the low driven, and I was doing it all the time. And then I think I picked up the 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦 card that has low driven plus, and I was like, why does this play style never show up? And it's just like, it would never come up. And then, like, at some point, like, I hit the shoot button so quick that it was almost like an accident. And then low driven popped up, and I was like, huh, even when I think I'm tapping the button, I'm really not, I'm holding it down longer than I think I am, because it's not triggering the low driven. So I've been working on that a little bit more, trying to like really like focus on that quick button press. And maybe that's just the fact that I'm old, right? I mean, maybe I just like, the reactions aren't as fast, and I'm holding the button down like longer and not even realizing it. I don't know. But so I've been working on that a little bit more. I've actually kind of, I don't take finesses outside the box as much anymore. I do occasionally now, because like, who has the right striker is on false 9. And I actually don't really have a great false 9 player, but I do have that new Lewandowski, and he's got a plus in there, and he does have silver incisive. He doesn't have incisive plus, but he's got finesse plus, and he's very much like that Harry Kane card where you could just shoot it from wherever, and he's just like got a great shot. So every once in a while, you know, I'll take a shot with him from outside the box, but I've been trying to focus more on working the ball in and taking higher, I guess, higher percentage chances. And I think that in and of itself has worked out a little bit, not as many shots. And yeah, like, you know, we talking just briefly about XG. It's funny because, like, I was thinking about this after I did have a game like that over the weekend, I think, playing in Rivals. I had, I think, 7.5 XG, and the other guy had like 2, right? But I had 7 goals, right? It was just like one of those games that was just going back and forth. And then, like I said, I had 7 goals, and I don't remember if I beat him 7-6 or he beat me 8-7. But like there's a huge disparity XG, and it's like mine tends to kind of match up a lot with how many goals I scored, whereas my opponents, I feel like, oftentimes have a higher goal count than XG. So I don't know if it's just because, they're taking a lot of, those kind of like bugged shots with like, like a 𝘃𝘀𝗃𝘀 from outside the box, or if it's just, I'm just giving up, or they're just converting like every single chance. I've definitely had games where it's like I've lost 5-4 and the opponent's got 5 shots on goal. I feel like it's happened less since I've replaced my keeper. I was using 𝗵𝗚𝘀𝗀𝘀 and now I'm using 𝘵𝚗𝑚, but yeah, I don't know. I'm curious what you guys think about XG, because like, yeah, Bert's right. There was a time where I was just like losing my mind, and I was just posting just some ridiculous XG chart over and over and over again. And if this was Football Manager, I probably would have broken my computer. So I don't know. I don't know what you guys kind of think about the whole XG thing.
What I would say though at XG, if you want my honest opinion, I would say you completely ignore it and you never look at it. It's a bit different in real life, but in FC, I would typically won't have a large XG, but I would still win the game. And I think a lot of people, especially psychologically speaking, they will see XG at halftime and they will start thinking, oh, I deserve to be ahead, or I should have X amount of goals. XG isn't really a thing, because when I'm defending, I'm actually pushing my opponent on a weaker angle and saying to them, I want you to shoot, because I know my player's in the way. I know my goalkeeper's in a good position. And I know them taking a shot at that point is a very low chance of them scoring. So XG, in my opinion, along with all the other stats, the only things I really look at is I look at possession just to see, for example, how the flow of the game is going. And then sometimes I look at my passing accuracy to see, okay, am I making silly passes? Am I doing ridiculous 180 passes? So that is the only 2 stats I look at. But the other stats, I completely ignore them. Because also what happens is when you're playing the game, it's kind of like, remember back in the day when someone said, oh, I've had 15 shots. But if you took 15 shots from the halfway line and your opponent has 1 shot, but they've shot inside the box in a clear 1v1, it's completely different. So just because you have a high XG or more shots, it doesn't mean you should be ahead. So in my opinion, I would just say don't even look at it. I just think, in my opinion, it's a pointless stat, especially in FC, because we don't exactly know how the XG is calculated. We don't know the exact intricacies. And it could be, for example, is it a shot at a specific angle? But we know in FC, it doesn't take into account precision shooting. It doesn't take into account many things. So in my opinion, I would just not even look at it. And I think there was a study ages ago. It was in sports psychology with tennis players. And I think they found that the top tier tennis players, the more positive they were, and they're thinking like, I'm going to win this next point, or generally help their performance. And even though you don't think about it, trust me, when you're losing a game and you're seeing your XG is higher and you're seeing you have more shots, you're going to start thinking negatively, oh, the game's against me. Especially if you do believe in scripting or DDA, it's going to multiply. So in my opinion, I would just completely ignore that.
That's interesting, because I would say on the flip side, the way I have often used it myself is I've looked at the XG and thought, but I'm not just looking at the XG, to be fair. I guess I'm looking at like the passing accuracy is something that I'll look at, and things like that, just to be like, actually, like, am I playing as well as maybe I think I am, or am I playing better than I think I am? And I guess I'm using it to decide whether I need to make some changes, because I will sometimes change formation. So I guess maybe there is a way to use it if you can kind of use it positively. But as you say, there are dangers to kind of looking at it and being like, oh, I should be winning, and like getting kind of triggered by that, I guess. I don't know what you think about it, Josh. Are the things you're looking for when you look at the stats to kind of give you an indicator in terms of how you're playing, or are you basing it off what you've seen, I guess, already?
Do you know what's weird? My mentality is to get myself out of the game as quickly as possible. Like, I don't want to, if I feel like I've been unfairly beaten, I know that I feel like I've been unfairly beaten, and whether I see stats, if the stats back that up, I'm going to be more frustrated. And if the stats don't back that up, I'll say that the stats are a joke anyway. So, I don't think there's that much to be gained if you're frustrated about losing. Now, if it's something where you want to, like, maybe dig into the stats and see, like, okay, what is it that I'm doing that's being effective, or like, why did that game feel the way that it did, then the stats can maybe reveal certain aspects of it. I'm always reminded of I think it was 𝘵𝘂𝘀𝘀, and he said stats are like bikinis. What they show is very interesting, but what they don't show is just as interesting. Like, it is that idea that you can just look at the stats and know how a game went. I mean, as Neil said, if you take, you know, a bunch of power shots from 40 yards out, I don't care if you had more shots than me. I almost don't care with possession if you had more possession with me. Some people play incredibly slowly around their back line and want to, you know, pass it to the fullback and, he's blocked my pass down the line, so now I'm going to come the other way, and now I'm going to go back the other way. Whereas if you're somebody who likes to, you know, move the ball vertically quite quickly, then you're going to spend less time, you know, messing around on the ball. And maybe you had a 2-0 lead at 60 minutes, and so you started being a little more cautious on the ball, and you were holding it a little bit longer. And so if you give away 2 goals at the end, you're going to be like, well, I had more possession. It's like, well, yeah, that's just how the game goes. So I try not to get caught up in the stats too much. I absolutely don't think I've ever looked at XG in a match this year, because it's not a great stat anyway, like in real world football, unless it backs my point up, in which case it's the only stat that matters. But I think, like, I especially think in a video game, yeah, if you're consistently underperforming your XG, maybe there's something you need to consider there. I tend to think if you're underperforming your XG, it's probably because you're not doing the overpowered things. But I also think there's a skill element there as well. Like, if you know, if you're only taking shots when you've created a very good chance, if you're only taking, you know, if you're better at putting those chances away, then you're probably going to outperform your XG. And actually, seeing your opponent having less XG and more goals might be an indicator that they're more skilled than you, rather than the game being rigged against you. So I think you can twist stats to suit whatever narrative you want, which is why I would say, again, just to back up my initial point, if you're frustrated, never go to the stats.
Yeah, I think it's a good point to say, actually, you shouldn't necessarily ignore stats completely. And I think, actually, if you're someone who's going to think about stats a bit more in terms of how it's impacting your game, it's important to kind of look at them over a long period, I suppose, and start to try and pick up on the patterns that might indicate you're not playing so well potentially, or you're doing something that is a bad habit. So like pass accuracy, maybe if you keep looking at that over time, you might eventually see that, like when I play this formation against certain opponents, actually I do have lower pass accuracy than I want to, or that I do when I win. And so that means I should probably change formation and try something different. So I think in some contexts, it can be quite useful. You mentioned 𝘵𝘂𝘀𝘀's there, and they're obviously a big factor in, I think, XG not being that accurate sometimes, because the 𝘵𝘂𝘀𝘀's people score often quite low XG chances. And on that topic, I did want to ask a question about that after the break. Hello, welcome back after the break. Now, Neil, 𝘵𝘂𝘀𝘀's a really common way to score at the moment. I mean, I think ultimately goalkeepers just really need patching, because it's been an issue for a while. We'll see whether anything happens on that front. I wouldn't really expect it to happen this cycle now, unfortunately. But what advice do you give to people defending 𝘵𝘂𝘀𝘀's?
So when it comes to 𝘵𝘂𝘀𝘀's, they are quite difficult to defend, because you see with a finesse shot, normally the player gets the ball and they almost open their body up. So you know kind of somewhat that a finesse is coming. Whereas with a 𝘵𝘂𝘀𝘀, what you find are really top tier players, what they do is when they go, let's say trying to get inside the box normally and they can't, then they rotate the ball all the way around. You don't know what's coming. Is it going to be a pinged pass to the striker, or are they getting the 𝘵𝘂𝘀𝘀 shot ready? And that's where I think I get taken the most, is when up against a really top tier player and they're very unpredictable. I would say the best advice I can give you is, look, number one, try to move the goalkeeper. I've tried far reach and everything. It doesn't always work. And when it's a green time 𝘵𝘂𝘀𝘀, even if you move the goalkeeper, just make sure I move it a bit backwards. So I think people naturally move the goalkeeper to the left or to the right, but they actually move the goalkeeper a bit forward. So make sure you're actually moving it towards the goal. That's the first thing. And the second thing I would say is preventing the shot from happening. Now, this can be a bit of an elaborate thing to do and it takes some practice, but it's with using teammate contain. if you know, for example, there's a striker available, sometimes you may have to go and man mark that player because that's going to be the clear person to pass the ball to, and ultimately your opponent will score. But what I try to do, especially if you've got CDMs, I try to apply teammate contain, and then when that player comes close, I then apply pressure or try to push them away from that zone. Normally, you would find the top tier players are very, very unpredictable and they won't do the same thing every time. Those are difficult, but if you're up against someone just spamming Travellas all the time, that is when you can start using teammate contain. And, when the ball gets swung back around to the center mids outside the box of those players, you can select the player nearby. So that's what I would say. So I say teammate contain, although it's hard to use, but in the right areas, probably the most effective way of defending. So using teammate contain to close the player down, and that way you can control the main area yourself, and then you can apply pressure with teammate contain. And if you need to, if need be, you can always select that player after.
That was really helpful, very comprehensive. And actually, we can move on to this question, which will inform what we're talking about next, because I'm going to struggle to actually say this, so I'll say the letters. 𝗂𝘃𝗃𝗃𝗃 asks, or says, as a graduating student from NealGuides Academy, I went from Division 6 to Division 2. I'm keen to share some of the top tips from the academy. Obviously, people should check out the full academy for all the tips because there are many, many there. But what I thought actually we would do before sharing the ones that he found really useful is maybe just go around and give our kind of top straightforward Division 6 appropriate tip for listeners out there. And I guess, Cherry, you're someone who's progressed from there up to higher divisions yourself. Is there a particular thing that you would highlight as being kind of the top of the tips for players at that kind of level?
You should always hold down the sprint button. Okay, April Fools, right? I don't know if that's a thing over in England, but no, honestly, this is going to hopefully this isn't too meta, but I really do think that, especially if you're focused on trying to win, like in champs in particular, right? The most important thing is you have to forget the last game. And like, I know you guys probably talk about a lot more like the technical stuff. I mean, as complicated as EAFC is, it's a pretty basic game, just like the game of soccer, right? There's a couple of buttons, right? And I think we've talked about, right? Like we've talked about skill moves and all this like fancy stuff you can do. You can be successful without doing any of it, right? Like I can barely ball roll consistently, right? And I'm able to get to Division 2. I'm able to get at least 8 wins, right? Which, technically is above average in champs. And remember, champs is also just a very, very small subset of the players on top of it, right?
Like 10% or something, maybe less.
Yeah, and it kind of brings back like a point that, and I realized this over the weekend because I was playing a game, and I if you guys listen to the last gameplay pod I was on, I mentioned I have a really hard time going up 2 goals and losing, right? Like that happens to me all the time. But here's the thing. Nobody I'm playing knows that, right? I might know that I've lost a lot of these games like that, but nobody I'm playing does that. So I take the Richard Buckley advice, which is when you're up 2-0, you go for the throat. You keep on going, right? And oftentimes I'll get a 3rd goal and the player will rage quit, not knowing that I have absolutely no idea how to hold this lead, right? And so like what you just kind of need to do is you kind of got to forget the last game, right? Maybe you mess something up, it cost you something, wipe it out as quickly as possible and just get back to it. And remember, the person you're playing doesn't know anything about your game or how many games you've lost or how many games you won, right? Champs matchmaking, I think this year is just a hodgepodge where you don't know, what form the player you're getting is coming in on. So I really do think that, you guys will be able to probably talk a little bit more of the mechanical stuff, the button presses and stuff like that. But really, it's just like, look, like these games last 10 minutes, right? So you could have the worst 10 minutes of your life and just lose something. Guess what? You can queue up for another game right away, right? So, just remember that, forget about the last game, go into each game, kind of focused on the game that's there. Don't worry about the last thing. And just remember, like, even if you have holes in your games or whatever, you have deficiencies, right? Or maybe you are a Division 6 player. If you're in champs, the person you're playing doesn't know you're a Division 6 player, right? So, I mean, it's not like they're going to be able to be like, oh, I'm going to run over this guy, right? So I don't know, just kind of go into it with a clear mind, because I feel like in particular that was kind of one of the things, going back to what has changed with lately, is that I'm just more relaxed when I play, and I don't know if it's just more because I'm feeling more comfortable, and I'm just not as worried about losing games. Like the 8-7 I had this weekend was probably the easiest 8 wins I've ever gotten. I've gotten 8 wins a handful of times. It's the easiest 8 wins I ever got. And I don't know, I just wasn't sweating it. And it was just a much more enjoyable experience. And I mean, we play this to have fun, right? I mean, we also play this game to get mad, right? That's why we look at stats and get upset. I mean, everyone does that. But, in the end, it's supposed to be fun. Wipe that last game out and just kind of look forward to the next one.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent bit of advice, and one that applies definitely to all levels. Right, let's move on to you, Josh. What would you go for here?
Yeah, I'd echo that. Be a goldfish, as they say in Ted Lasso. Like, you gotta forget the previous game. That will definitely improve you. In terms of like mechanical, especially if we were talking about rivals, what would help in Div 6 and rivals, turn the passing indicator on. I think passing is probably one of the things people struggle the most with and have the most questions about. The number of times you hear, I didn't pass that ball there. That's not where I aimed it. Why has that pass gone there? If you have the passing indicator on, you'll have the answers to all of those questions. You'll see how the game determines like the difference between the power and the accuracy of what you've done. If you're aiming in a different place, but you put the right amount of power on, it might compensate for that. But if you're aiming in the right place, but put too much power on, maybe it's going to skip out a player and it goes somewhere you don't want. You might want to fire a pass in, but it's only a 5 or 10 yard pass. And so in your head, you put loads of power on it because you're directing it in the right place, but actually it ends up skipping 2 or 3 players and goes across the other side of the pitch. And that's not really what you wanted. So for me, I know this worked for Luke, who produces the podcast. He had that on for a good 2 months at the beginning of the cycle, and it completely changed the way he was passing the ball because he got to learn how the game dictates what your inputs mean to it. So that would be in terms of one setting that I would put on, I would definitely give that a go. If you're somebody who doesn't want to try precision shooting because it feels like too much of a learning kind of jump to begin with, it's quite a steep curve, even though I think you get there fairly quickly, I would suggest putting on the timed finish indicator so that you can learn timed finishing. At least have that extra skill in your arsenal when it comes to scoring that isn't precision. Have that ability to time your shots and at least start learning when you can, how long can you leave it so that you're safe, that if you press it too late you're not going to get punished for it, but you might just get it right every now and then and get that perfect shot off. So they would be the two kind of really basic things. I actually think they'd be really helpful for people who are even at a higher skill level, because I actually think the gap between a Div 6 player and a Div 3 or 2 player is actually quite small. It's more just your ability in those, it's your ability to keep your head, definitely, not dive in, to be patient within a match, your ability to take your chances, but also your ability to look after the ball. It's usually just mistakes that mean people stay in Division 6. It's not because they aren't able to do the things that people in higher divisions can do. The people in higher divisions don't make mistakes, don't make that poor pass, don't try and pass the ball too quickly with a player with not great passing. They, not considering that, okay, this is going to be on his weak foot. He doesn't have first touch. He doesn't have tiki-taka. I'm not going to hit it as a through ball because he's got incisive plus. I'm just going to hit it as normal X pass. But do you know what I mean? There are lots of different aspects to those things where it's just about not making that mistake. And I think passing is probably the most basic one.
Yeah. My tip was going to be on passing, and I think the biggest thing that I see when playing a player I can tell is a bit lower in terms of their divisions is that they don't pass the ball backwards or move backwards with the ball. And it's fundamental to real football as well. It's not just something that applies to FC. If you watch any match of football, the amount of passes backwards, I mean, with certain teams, there are far too many almost, but it is just such a basic thing, but something that you really just don't see as much as you really should, I think, considering how much difference it makes. Because even by passing the ball backwards, you can still create space further up the pitch. The amount of times, if I pass it into my striker, hold it for just a few seconds and move it back into midfield, my opponent will like control their centre back and then move them into a weird spot for some reason. Like, it will open up chances, even, though it doesn't seem like you're doing anything particularly complex. I mean, you're not doing anything particularly complex. And even if you're just using it to kind of circulate the ball, to build out from the back, it will just move around your opponent and you'll see opportunities to make the pass. People forcing passes, especially now we have players with really good passing, you've got pinged plus and that sort of thing, is such a common mistake people make that I think, if you just think about the fact that maybe if I play 2 passes forwards, I need to play 1 back, obviously don't be actually as strict as that, then I think you'll find that you start to realize that by passing it backwards, you will open up more opportunities going forwards. And, I mean, you could, if you wanted to, just treat it like a bit of a drill in training against someone in a game you don't care about that much and just try doing that, play 2 passes forward, but try and play 1 back. And I think it'll make quite a big difference. Right, let's move on to Neil for the final tip of this discussion.
Ben, I just want to ask a question. I wanted to mention a series that I do. Is it okay? Because it's kind of self-promoting. Is it okay?
No, absolutely. Go for it. Yeah.
Okay.
Completely.
So my first tip would be I think that all the tips you've given, I think, are all very good. I think especially the passing one, the indicator. I think a lot of people don't even know how pass assistance works, which is actually, I think a lot of people don't even know how it works exactly, but that's a very good way of seeing how the pass assistance works and if your pass is going the right way. I would say that the number one thing is just to not lose the ball in your own half. This is both in real life football and in Corden FC. Most goals are conceded from giving the ball away. As Ben said, look, if you have to go backwards, just go backwards. It doesn't mean that you need to go all the way back to your goalkeeper, but if you can't go forward, let's say you're going down the wing, you got the ball with your right attacking mid, you're running down the wing and your opponent's doubling up on you. It's fine to go back and rotate the ball around or do a quick 1-2 with your right back so your right attacking mid runs. It's so important just to go backwards. I don't mean to go all the way back, but if you can't find that pass, don't force it. I think a lot of people concede a lot of goals in their own half because they give the ball away stupidly. If you're really not sure, I have a rule. Just go back to your goalkeeper and just smack the ball clear. You can smack the ball out. You don't have to worry or panic. You can use a precision lob pass, full power, just smack the ball going forward, and it'll give you some time to reset. And you actually might get lucky with the ball going in behind, but you didn't hear that from me. But the key thing is, I would say, is just don't lose the ball. If you're unsure and there's players around you that are applying pressure, take a touch away. But if you're really not sure, just pass the ball back. It's better to pass it backwards than take a risk. And kind of on that, I did on my Patreon, I have a Division 10 to Elite Division series, and we go from Division 10 to the Elite Division. And I talked about this in the series, but all the way up to about Division 2, maybe Division 1, a lot of it is actually good players. These people are actually good at the game. They're actually good at attacking. They know how to play the game, but they make such silly defensive mistakes. It's easy for me to capitalize on it. And I'm not doing anything crazy. I'm not doing just basic passes. And the reason why I said it is that a lot of people just keep running out with their defenders. It's such a basic mistake. I know I keep going on about it, but a lot of people do it and they don't realize. The only way you're truly going to know is, and if you're serious about improving, is watch your gameplay back. Every time you concede a goal, just save that last 30 seconds. Don't watch the goal you conceded. Watch 10 seconds before. What happened? How did I lose the ball? What did I do with my defender? Why is my defender out of position? Ask yourself those questions, because when I was going through this series, I wasn't even doing anything crazy, but my opponent was just making it easy for me to score. I didn't have to work hard. I didn't have to rotate the ball, but I was just going past them because they were running out with their centre backs. If I had my striker running, they weren't bothering bringing their CDM back. They're just running out straight with the defender. And I'll tell you something. After someone normally concedes one goal, they start becoming more aggressive, trying to get the ball a bit more, and then end up making more and more mistakes. So it's such a basic mistake. But I just say, if you could just focus on those two things, don't lose the ball in your half or on silly positions, or like if you've got the ball when you have a corner outside the box, and then don't run out with your centre backs, or if you're not sure, just run back if you're in doubt. Just those small things, I'll be honest, is the biggest difference between you get from Division 6 to like Division 3, Division 2. I promise you, it's that simple. You can play the exact same way, fix those issues. I promise you, you will fly through Division 5, 3, and even up to 2 very easily just by that simple tip.
Nice. Yeah, another great tip or set of tips, I guess. Let us then take a break and we'll come back as there are some more bits of advice to share right after this break. Hello, and in this break, a quick reminder that the pod is made possible by supporters. The pod didn't used to be weekly. Yes, Foot Weekly wasn't actually weekly for a time. And then someone suggested setting up the Patreon. And since then, the pod has been weekly. And in fact, it's been twice weekly because there is that supporter episode every single week. So if you'd like to catch that episode and keep the podcast going, it's just £3 a month to do so. And you get loads in return. And there are perks higher than that, including access to the Discord too. So if you're interested and would like to support the podcast, then head over and search Support for Weekly. Go to Patreon and it's very easy to sign up. If you are a supporter keeping the podcast going, then a huge thank you for doing so. And if you do consider supporting, a huge thank you too. Right, let's jump back into the pod. Hello, welcome back after the break. So as I mentioned before, we had this question in which listed some tips that they had found very helpful from Neal's course. So I'll just share a couple of those, if that's okay with you, Neal. I don't want to give away all your secrets, but people can obviously find out
just for
more.
the podcast, only for the podcast.
Just for the podcast. Exactly. So he said, hardly ever use sprint. Instead, use technical dribbling. So for those who don't know, that's R1/RB. To not break the defensive line unless absolutely necessary. CDMs are your friend. To use the co-op camera to see more of the pitch. Use variants of the same formation, depth rolls, etc. during a game on the D-pad to keep opponents guessing. Jockey is the best playstyle in the game, and don't overuse running jockey. I totally agree on the jockey shout. It is extremely good. Right. Talking about playstyles there, I thought we would talk a little bit about load driven. I mean, we've talked about it every week for a few weeks, but it is obviously a new playstyle to the game, and that's a big deal. We haven't heard Neal's thoughts on it. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear how you've been finding it, if you think it's overpowered, and also what you'd give in terms of advice for people wanting to use it.
So I actually love the load driven. It should have been there when the game came out, but I was worried that initially there wouldn't be that many players with the play style, but you know what? Fair play to EA, credit where credit's due. There's been so many Evos now recently with the low driven, so you could have had one of your favorite players and given them the low driven play style. I think, look, if you know how to time your shots, use precision shooting, and do a low driven, you can't stop the shot. I think doing all those three, I know it's very hard to do, but doing all those three together is probably one of the most meta ways of scoring right now. We were talking about XG and all this stuff earlier. Listen, you get in the right place and you aim it, no goalkeeper is stopping, even if you move the goalkeeper. What I would say is, I think we talked about this previously in the podcast, just like a few segments ago, but when you use the low driven, I would say forget trying to get it below 40% power. Just focus on the tapping. Because I think the hardest thing is trying to time it. My best advice is, if you use precision shooting, just press a tap button. Just focus on the accuracy. And even if you do the most gentle, tap it as fast as you can, don't worry, the pace will still be there and enough to beat the goalkeeper. But when you combine that with the precision shooting and you get the faster ball speed, and then you combine that with the time shooting, if you aim it, I'm telling you, there's certain angles that you can score from even just on the edge of the box across goal. So it's all about practice and just go into, the skills arena, squad battles even, and just practice getting into the corner. That's all I would say.
Yeah. I know you talked about it a bit earlier, Cherry, but have you found it good so far?
Yeah. And you want to know what's funny is I think I even find just the silver play style, the regular play style, very, very good. There was the Evo. I have I forgot how many games on Team of the Week on, because I packed them in week 1 or 2 of the cycle, and he basically never left my team. But there was the Evo, the Foot Birthday Evo you could put him through, where he gets Rapid Plus and he gets Low Driven regular. and the amount of times that he can just slot it in. I mean, you have just a bunch of different options with how you want to finish. Outside the box, you can use, the finesse shot plus, but once you get inside the box, the accuracy with it is really good. I mentioned, like I said, with Team of the Week, or not Team of the Week, Foot Birthday Rodman, same thing. And even that Lewandowski that I have, that low driven really, really helps. And honestly, like I said, I thought I was triggering it more often than I was. And once I got that gold play style, I was able, it was able to help me realize, okay, I'm putting too much power on it. It really, really is just a tap with precision shooting. Just tap it as quick as possible, and you get enough pace. And even if you don't get a lot of pace on it visually, we know that this is a video game. The goalkeepers just act funny. And sometimes, right, you put like a real slow shot, and then it just rolls under the keeper anyways. So, great play style. I love it. And basically, I think every forward I have that I use has it.
Yeah, I agree with that. It is really good, and I'm glad they've been somewhat generous with it. And that little play style that they added, regular one that you can unlock through the objective, is very handy indeed. Right. Let us move on to some more bits of advice, because I wanted to ask you, Neil, is a kind of a more advanced tip you recommend people picking up? We're focused on sort of the more, I guess, straightforward things you can add to your game, but anything that you think players who are slightly better should be considering learning?
Yes, I would say one of the best things you can do right now, I think Trivelas and speed boosts are good. They could be nerfed next year. There's good high chance. I would say player lock. Since it's been introduced, it hasn't really been nerfed or buffed in any way, but it really gives you the ability to control the attacking player and moving them into positions that you want to move them in. And I think it's probably one of the most effective ways to get the ball down the wing. If you can get the ball to your right back even and activate the player lock, which will be the L3 and R3 button, you click them in when you get an audible click sound, and then you'll just right stick switch to a player. And although it does seem a bit finicky in the beginning, it does take some time to get used to. I would recommend going into squad battles, trying it out, but it's actually relatively easy to do. In the beginning, it's a bit difficult, but trust me, make sure it's on in your settings, of course. But when you activate the player lock, I think down the wing is one of the most effective ways, especially if someone's using their CDMs a lot of the time and you really can't break through. Using the player lock on a winger, especially a fast winger, can help you give it that edge. Or you can sometimes go on the outside and then be unpredictable, which is key here, and sometimes be inverted and go between a half space between your opponent's defense or centre backs and their left back or right back.
Yeah, I don't use it loads, but I do use it quite often when I've got a wide player who is wide of the fullback. I'll maybe be with my fullback or something, and then I'll play a lock to the winger and just bring that player inside the fullback, between the fullback and the centre back, ask for that through ball off the fullback, and often just get in on goal basically. So yeah, definitely recommend it. Actually, Gary asked, how do you defend against player locks? I find they send my defense into the tumble dryer and I have no idea how to defend them. So yeah, what would you recommend on that, Neil?
Okay, so defending against the player lock, it is quite tricky. It does depend on the situation. Every situation is different. But let's say, for example, you had the player lock with your winger and you're going up against your opponent. And let's say they're the back four and you're going on the outside. Let's say you're attacking down the right flank and you're going on the outside. What you would need to do if you would defend that situation is you will need to control the left back. And then what you could do is use teammate contain. But the main player you control is the player that's covering the player that's running in behind. That's with the player locks. What I mean is, let's say your opponent's chosen the right wing. They're running in behind with the right wing. You should be controlling your left back and trying to cover that run. It's kind of difficult. And I think where the top tier players do it very well is they do like first time through balls with player locks. You don't see it that common, but if you play the high tier elite divisions, you might see it quite commonly, first time player locks. But the key I would say is focus on the player. And let's say, for example, if the opponent has the ball and they've used a player lock, and let's say they're running down the wing with a right winger, the player in the middle, they have to then cancel it and then make the pass to someone else. So you still have some time to go and defend it. But it is a bit of a tricky one, I'll be honest. It's hard to explain as well without a visual example, but I would say always focus on the player that's actually moving manually, and you can always apply teammate contain to the ball carrier.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It is a very contextual thing to defend. So, and it is a tricky thing to defend as well, which is why it's good to learn, I guess.
Yeah, it definitely sounds better than my tactic of just fear and panic their player locking, which tends to be what happens.
And just suddenly assuming the guy's like, extremely good.
Yeah, this guy gets 15-0 every week. There's no chance he doesn't because he, player locked. And he probably did it by accident. He's panicking just as much as I am. But, nothing helps in my head. That person is essentially Tex at that point.
Hey, it's like I said before, nobody knows how good you are. So
yeah, maybe just do a player lock at the start and then you got them scared.
No, but don't do that one because then they will rage quit. So you got to be careful because if you do it too early, they'll think this guy's good. So maybe score that goal first, then start doing a player lock.
Well, actually, talking about things that have drawn rage quits, the thing that I've been finding really effective at the moment, particularly because I've got technical plus players in the center of the pitch, is the effort touch. And I remember talking about this before, and a few people were saying they were struggling to work out what made it effective, and others were saying it has been really effective. What I realized I didn't actually say when I talked about it before is that you can vary the heaviness of the touch depending on how much you flick that right stick. So how much kind of force you put into the flick or how much distance you put into the flick of the right stick. So for those who don't know, the way to do the effort touch is you hold R1 or RB and then you flick the right stick in the direction you want to go. And it's really good with technical plus, particularly because obviously you're already holding the R1 RB button, and then you can just do a little touch in the direction you want to go. And what you really need to think about with this is kind of less is more. The more gentle the touch, the less the ball's going to get away from you, and the quicker you can kind of change direction again with another flick. And I've gone through entire defenses with this, honestly, and it is, by far the biggest rage quit inducer I'm using at the moment. It is so good, and it also looks like quite natural and realistic. And you can imagine Messi doing exactly what you're doing in real life, so that's quite nice. And it is, as I said, really good with those technical plus players. Definitely give it a go. Just a little flick on the right stick while holding R1 or RB, and the less you flick, the better. Any other kind of tips people have before we wrap up?
If you want a super high level tip, something I've started adding in the box is shot cancels, and I've never sent so many people on skates before in my entire life.
And so that's just take a shot and then press LTRT.
And the biggest thing really is to be wary of how you exit them, because you're kind of doing something that realistically shouldn't kind of work in the physics engine of the game, because it's not a move. It's like you're cancelling an input, and so the player just kind of assumes a new body position rather than it being something that looks natural. The biggest issue I found learning it is getting the direction right coming out of it. And once you can get that, once you can kind of start sending people to block something and moving the other way, or even just turning backwards, it's one of those things that, especially if you notice someone who's kind of relying a lot on a jockey or even a second man press where they're using the computer doesn't know what to do when you do it. And in fact, what I learned it playing squad battles, because it really does send the computer. And it's fun. I would recommend it if you want to try something new.
Yeah, that is a fun thing to do as well. Well, it does, as you say, look a little bit glitchy maybe. Nice. Well, I think that does now wrap us up. So Cherry, it's been great to have you back on the podcast. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me anytime.
It's been good. And of course to Neil as well. Always good to have your tips on the podcast.
Thanks for having me on. Always good to be here as usual.
Yeah, no, it's been good. Obviously, you can catch NealGuides guides on his channel, NealGuides. Search that on YouTube. Loads of informative stuff. And thank you very much as well to Josh. Great to have you back on.
Thanks very much. I love taking Neil's tip on the podcast as well. It's been great.
And with that, do subscribe for the various different podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. And if you'd like an extra podcast every single week, then you can become a supporter. Just £3 a month for double the podcast content. Just search support for weekly in your search engine and head over to Patreon. Thank you very much to all those supporters keeping the podcast going, including those icon patrons: Dave B, Darren W, Hugh J, Rob W, Brent P, Ralph, Josh R, Brian, Michael B, Adam R, Berta Saka, Make B, Michael H, Andrew P, Arian B, Rob S, Michael K, Neil P, Jake S, Tom B, Alex M, Alan G, Lee A, Chris G, Mark M, Dom P, Rob P, Roger D, Dan W, Waterman, Also Ran, and Juicy. Plus a special thanks to Luke M, Dave B, Hugh J, Tom M, Darren W, and Pato Foot for advice and production assistance. Before I leave you, just one more thing to add though. Ultimate Team is a bit like life really. It has its many ups and downs. If you're having a few more downs than ups in real life in these more difficult times, then please don't feel that you're alone or need to struggle on without taking action. If you go to thecalmzone.net, there's loads of resources, advice, support, or even just a friendly chat for anyone who needs it. If it sounds like it could help you, then head over to thecalmzone.net. And for now, have a good one, and I'll catch you on the next podcast.